It's a new week and obviously a new host here on Sports Talk Philadelphia. But don't worry, we're here to bring you all the content you need on your Philadelphia sports teams, including the Eagles' big matchup against their rival Dallas Cowboys Monday night. So stick around for this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Hello and welcome back to Sports Talk Philadelphia. I'm your host for this week, Aiden Tiksinski. Joined with me by my co-host, Tyler Small. How are you doing today, Tyler?
I'm better now. How are you doing, Aiden?
Doing well, and we're here with a couple new panelists as well. We have Mike as a new panelist, first time on the show. How are you doing today, Mike?
Good, man. Nothing better than talking some Philly sports.
Yes, indeed. And we have somewhat a returning panelist in Siobhan Nolan. Siobhan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Very happy to be back. It's really nice.
Good to have you back. So we're going to jump right in with some Eagles talk today. Obviously, the Eagles had a bit of a down game from their previous Week 1 win over the Falcons, a 17-11 loss to the 49ers. A couple of good players so far. Jalen Hurts had another great game, 272 total yards and one rushing touchdown. Quez Watkins with 2 catches and 117 receiving yards. Tyler, I'm going to go with you first. What are your reactions to this game?
It was kind of what I expected from it. I said it last week. It was going to be a battle of coaching. And fortunately, Nick Sirianni's first real test on a battle of wits in a low-scoring game did not go in his favor. I ran into a little interesting statistic where I was thinking about it, where it just always seems that the Eagles, against a game manager quarterback, similar to a Garoppolo, who went 22 for 30, over a 70% completion percentage, they always seem to struggle against not a quarterback that you would circle going into a week that would excel. And kind of the numbers back it up. Since 2019, their record against quarterbacks with an over 70% completion percentage and no passes over 15 yards down the field, they are 2-6. And the only 2 wins came from Kyler Murray and another Nick Gannon, who actually went out and did it. So just when you see that, I mean, Big Ben, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Beathard, Taysom Hill, like these quarterbacks that really shouldn't be, even though there's a new defensive coordinator in town, these are games that you need to be able to win. And just kind of getting out-coached and not being able to make the true tackles. And defensively, I thought there was a lot of lapses, even though it was only 17 points they allowed. There was a lot of things that you have to circle in the off time this week, I should say, that should be changed for the upcoming future.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to go to you next. We're going to get a little bit into Sirianni's coaching as well. But obviously, the Eagles did not play up to the standards that they did Week 1. What were your takeaways from this loss to the 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a game that they easily could have won. I mean, I think it was a lot of missed opportunities. I mean, going into the game, I think everybody had the Niners winning. I think they are the better team offensively and defensively. They have a proven coach, Kyle Shanahan. And, I mean, I think just missed opportunities. I mean, I think, that Quez Watkins play, the 91-yard reception from Hurts to him from the Eagles' own 3-yard line that set up a 1st and goal, and then you can't score any points on that drive. I mean, that's just unacceptable. And I mean that 4th down play, the Philly special in the Super Bowl was great, but I think that was just uncalled for to call it in that situation. And it was just a drive that they easily should have had points on, and just missed opportunities and just dumb penalties. Derek Barnett, we've seen in the past since we drafted him, 14th overall pick, he's just made some dumb plays and he just hasn't produced. I mean, defensive ends, I don't think one defensive end has a sack this year, so. I mean, it's just classic mistakes by the Eagles, and hopefully they can, shore it up and get back playing, Eagles football next week against the Cowboys.
Yeah, so both Tyler, you and Mike touched on this a little bit. The Eagles are just making several mistakes. One of the biggest ones was just the play calling by Sirianni, going for it on that 4th down. A lot of fans question that. He's now 0 for 3 on 1st downs on the season. So, Tyler, I'm going to ask you, how do you think about how Sirianni's play calling? Do you think that it has hurt the Eagles more than it has helped?
I mean, it's still a small sample size, of course. I mean, you see that 0 for 3 on 4th downs. That's kind of the way the league is going. The numbers are starting to back it up that it's worth it more times than not to go for the 7 points as opposed to 3 and go for it on 4th down and short field opportunities. But as I just kind of mentioned, it's just, wouldn't say it's necessarily what's the difference maker in them losing games, but it's more they could have won this game with a more competent coach. And that's just because he only has 2 games at the front of it. I mean, saw a very similar mold with the Colts, so I would have expected him to be better against a similar game style and game plan that the 49ers defense brings about, but they kind of locked down all the options. The only play that Quez catch for 91 yards, obviously, is one lapse in coverage, but besides that, everyone was kind of bottled up, and I thought Jalen Hurts had a really great performance in his ability to have a very mature game. For a young quarterback, I keep wanting to call him a rookie even though it's the second year. For a young quarterback like that, that's a very opportune time to throw a couple picks, and we saw plenty of rookie quarterbacks struggle this week against similarly ranked defenses. But he didn't throw any interceptions. He kind of just took his checkdowns. He was 12 for 23. He rushed for 86. And it's just, the only difference I would have said is what you said last week. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Miles Sanders, they didn't really utilize him even though he was getting 4.2 yards per touch. And that's the only thing that was really questionable for me.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Obviously, the running game that was so good week 1 wasn't really there week 2. However, as bad as the offense looked, even though they struggled, the defense just looked great. Held the 49ers to under 20 points. They're now only one of 4 teams in the entire NFL to not allow a team to score 20 points yet. Mike, I'm going to go to you. Was your standout player for the defense for this week?
I think that's easy. I think it's Javon Hargrave. I mean, even last week, he had a couple sacks last week. He didn't have any sacks this week, but I think he had like 6 QB pressures. So, I mean, he definitely, you can tell he's on that D-line. He makes an impact. Fletcher Cox, people get on him that, he can't, he doesn't put up the stats in the stat sheet, but he always makes an impact. But I think Hargrave is definitely the one that, stands out to me in week 2, and hopefully he can continue it throughout the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing that happened to the Eagles that was very unfortunate, a couple of very key injuries to some really important guys. Brandon Graham, who tore his ACL, he's going to be out for this season. And Brandon Brooks, one of their best offensive linemen, he's going to be out for several weeks with a pectoral injury. But the biggest injury that might hurt the Eagles the most is actually Carson Wentz's injury. He sprained somehow. Yeah, we're going to keep talking about Wentz pretty much all season because he injured both of his ankles in this game. The issue with his injuries, if you guys recall from last spring, when the Eagles traded Wentz to the Colts gave away a second-round pick to the Eagles. That's a conditional second round that could turn into a first if Carson Wentz plays either 75% of the Colts' offensive snaps or 70% and the Colts make the playoffs. So, Mike, I'm going to go with you first. Do you think that Carson Wentz can play enough that the Eagles can get that first-round pick?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, we dealt with it for 4 years. I mean, he just, that first season he stayed healthy and he got injured in the preseason, but, and then he had the MVP season and tore his ACL. But then, a couple years after that, it just was, injury, and, it sucks that we got to keep talking about it, but, it impacts us because we want that first round pick. But I hope he can stay healthy, but, you never know with him.
Yeah, and then Tyler, I want to ask you, between the Brandon Brooks injury and the Brandon Graham injury, which one is more detrimental to the Eagles' success?
Despite the timeline looking better for Brooks, obviously, he is by far the biggest difference maker, as you said. I mean, Mike was talking a little bit about how there's been a lack of pressure so far in getting to the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. But Brandon Brooks, now Landon Dickerson is going to have to step up, obviously, and take that spot 1-for-1. But this is a chance now. Jordan Mailata comes in and takes Andre Dillard's spot. This is somebody we expected a lot of big things from. It's his time now to step up and kind of get into that rotation, earn his way back into that starting line, and figure out the rest of it, because there is a lot of youth here that can switch spots and take a different side of the ball, which is usually a lot harder for a seasoned veteran to do. It's been doing it for so long. But while you have them, and you haven't seen a lot of success from Dillard at the left tackle spot, that's going to be probably the biggest difference maker on if they're going to be okay or not with Brooks' injury.
Yeah, especially the offensive line. Key part of the Eagles' success when they have been good and very detrimental when they've been bad. Now we're going to touch a little bit on the Eagles playing the Cowboys. Obviously, huge early season game. Could potentially be playoff implications for the NFC East division winner. Tyler, I'm going to ask you first. What's your prediction for the game?
I hate facing this Cowboys team this year. This is the best they've looked in a while, and obviously that's always how they look to start the season, of course. Dak Prescott has come back. They have a ferocious offense, and their defense, alongside Minka Parsons, has been unbelievable to start. I don't like the Eagles in this matchup. I think it's going to be a multiple score sort of game, not in the Eagles' favor.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to ask you same question. Who wins, Cowboys or Eagles?
I think the Eagles get it done. I disagree with you, Tyler. I think the Cowboys defense is still the Cowboys defense. They played better last week. They only had the Chargers at 17 points, but I mean, they did play Tampa Bay week 1. Obviously the Super Bowl champs, very good offense, but they added Micah Parsons, but that defense is still a little, iffy. And I think our offense can have a good game, but our defense just has to play well. Cooper's questionable for Monday, and Gallup's out until October. So we'll see what happens, but I think the Eagles, I think they can win the game.
Yeah, hopefully they're able to pull it off. We're going to jump now into Phillies talk. Phillies have gone through a little bit of a crazy week. They started out last Thursday being down the Cubs 7-0, ended up winning 17-8, and then over the weekend lost 2-0 to the Orioles. Were able to salvage that series, but obviously they've been struggling a lot. Siobhan, I'm going to ask you now. Do you think that one of the biggest issues for the Phillies' struggles offensively is the fact that Rhys Hoskins has been hurt?
I definitely think that that's a big reason why, because Rhys Hoskins was having a pretty good season, to say the least, before he got injured. And it was one of those injuries where it was very sudden, it was very unexpected, and the Phillies kind of scrambled. And they didn't really know what to do, who was going to take his place. So I think Rhys Hoskins' injury is definitely a big reason as to why their hitting and their impact has kind of fell off so far.
Yeah, obviously you see they've been throwing a few people at first base. Trying Realmuto, now that he's hurt a little bit at first. Brad Miller obviously has been getting some time at first as well. But it's still, nothing seems to really be working offensively. However, the starting pitching has looked great. Tyler, I want to ask you, do you think that if the Phillies can potentially make it to the playoffs, it'll be because of how well the starting pitching has been?
Yeah, I mean, once you look at this new aged formula for success in the postseason, you just need 3 starters, and then the rest of your bullpen has to figure it out. And right now, if you have Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, and then Ranger Suarez going into a playoff series, other teams have to be worried. I mean, I didn't get a chance to really go off about him last week, but Ranger Suarez, what he has done for this Phillies team has been unbelievable. He has 10 starts and 4 saves on the season. He's the only pitcher in Major League Baseball to do that. I've never, in my 21 years alive, seen somebody close games in August and then start games in September and do it at such a level. He's got a 1.6 ERA. It's below a 1.2 when he's joined the starting rotation once again. He has just been able to get outs in bunches. He did it once again. He looked like he was going to get roughed up by the Orioles, gave up 2 runs in the first inning, went for 6 innings, 2 earned runs. He's just been unbelievable, and obviously on top of it, so we'll talk about Zach Wheeler, and Aaron Nola is always a coin flip.
Yeah, I mean, Ranger Suarez has been one of those guys that he's literally pitched anywhere that the Phillies needed to, and he's been very successful at it. Obviously, we're going to talk about Bryce Harper as well. He's been on a tear this week. 9 hits with 1 home run, 7 RBIs. He's been the one bright spot so far in the offense. Mike, I want to ask you, who needs to set up offensively for the Phillies to potentially make the playoffs this year?
I mean, I think it's just the guys around Harper. I mean, losing Hoskins was a big loss, but Segura's been great all season, but, guys like Didi, McCutchen, they got to step up. And, Harper's doing everything he can. I mean, he's having, his best season since his MVP season in 2015, and hopefully he can, get the MVP this year. But, I mean, just Didi, McCutchen, all the players around him, they just got to step up and play, obviously not on Bryce Harper level, but they just got to, play, and hopefully they can get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, so Bryce Harper's been playing really well. The other guy that's been awesome this season for the Phillies has been Zach Wheeler. He's having a Cy Young year, 14-9 record with a 2.83 ERA, 231 strikeouts, and those stats were not added in from last night, so obviously those went up a little bit as well. Siobhan, I want to ask you, can Zach Wheeler potentially win the Cy Young Award this year?
The fact that he's in Cy Young contention at all is kind of amazing to me. If you had asked me which Phillies pitcher was going to be in Cy Young contention, I probably wouldn't have said Zach Wheeler. I really think that he's got a good shot at it. I don't think he's going to win it because that's just how it is. Philadelphia athletes never win stuff like this. But I really think his numbers are great, and even if he doesn't win the Cy Young Award, he can still come away from this season, playoffs or not, knowing that he put in the work, he did what he had to do, and he really is a bright spot in a Phillies pitching rotation that was torturous to watch for so long. So even if he doesn't win it, he can still be proud of himself, and he'll have the love of Philly fans to hopefully kind of validate him in that sense if he doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that the Phillies have a potential MVP in Bryce Harper and a potential Cy Young in Zach Wheeler, something that doesn't really happen a lot in Philadelphia. Phillies this weekend, 4-game series against the Pirates. Very big because the Pirates are not very good. We could really use that to springboks into the first place in the division. We're going to go around and ask for some predictions for this weekend. So Tyler, I'm going to start with you. How did the Phillies do against the Pirates this weekend?
You can't really even call it a shoe-win because they haven't been able to take down some of the easier teams. I think that they will win. I think a big benchmark for them, obviously, the playoffs is their main push, but they're 4 wins away from their first winning season since 2011. So it's been a big comeback that they've been looking for right here. I'm hoping that they will do enough to get to the playoffs, obviously, but even if they just win enough to have a above 500 season, that would be huge for the team.
All right, Siobhan, same question to you. How did the Phillies do against the Pirates this weekend?
I really think against the Pirates, they've got a good shot. Like Tyler said, playoffs are the main focus, but they're just going to be wanting to keep that momentum up, get as many wins as they can, as many hits, as much offense going as they can. And the Pirates is a great way to do that because they're not so good. And even though we can struggle against kind of easier teams, quote unquote, I really think that we can come away with a good win for this series.
All right, finally, Mike, if the Phillies win this series, can they potentially get in first off of that?
I don't think so. I mean, the Braves are playing the Padres, and coming into the season, the Padres were, everybody had them as World Series contenders. I mean, you look at their roster, they got, a good team. I mean, Tatis and Machado alone, but they've been struggling. And for me, the Phillies, they got to at least win 3 out of 4 against the Pirates to set up that Braves series next week, because it's going to be tough. I mean, sweeping the Braves is going to be tough, but hopefully, they set up this weekend that they have a chance to get first place in that Braves series next week.
All right, and that wraps up Phillies Talk. And now we're going to go into the saga of the summer that now has gone into the fall. Ben Simmons has officially stated that he will not return to Philadelphia. Siobhan, how do you feel about Ben Simmons officially saying he wants out of Philly?
I think Ben Simmons needs to understand that he's not bigger than this team. He's not bigger than this city. He's being incredibly arrogant, especially with the way that he played in the playoffs. He has no room to be that arrogant. He has no room to be that disrespectful. I don't think Doc Rivers should have said that they're going to try to change Simmons' mind. I don't want a player like that in the Sixers. He's being so uncooperative. He's being so childish about it. And again, he hasn't had the play or the numbers to back up this kind of attitude. Not that any player does, but the fact that Ben Simmons has such a victim complex about this and everything is everybody else's fault and, there's no way that he's the problem, it doesn't sit right with me. Ben Simmons was such a sporting icon in Philly. It was Ben and Joel. Ben Simmons was, the guy that everyone loved, everyone was behind. And so to take that support that everyone gave him and just throw it behind him like it doesn't mean anything, I'm glad he's done with the Sixers because I think a lot of people in the city would agree that we don't want him here anymore and he shouldn't be in the team because this behavior and the way that he's been playing, he needs to be done. He does.
Yeah, I 100% agree, but those are some harsh words to the guy that was considered the second best player on the Sixers for so long. Tyler, I'm going to go to you. Does this finally mean that the Sixers will trade Ben Simmons?
And they're forcing the hand. I mean, just to go kind of off of what Siobhan said, he doesn't really have the numbers to back it up, especially when the postseason comes around. And I agree with that, but the more and more, it's a league-wide problem of players just talking their way out of a situation with the team. So it kills his draft value, even though or trade value, even though it already was. But they're going to have to move on with him. And as you said, a victim complex. I mean, this is a player that's going to be so undervalued, and we're not going to get a good return on him, not because he's refusing to show up and he's not going to play. All we asked him to do was learn how to shoot at a 25% clip at the bare minimum, just to take attempts to spread out the offense. We're not asking him to be a completely different player. And it's just the way that it's unfolded is less on just necessarily him, even though he is being a drama queen, as Siobhan said, but it's more on the league and how James Harden's moves kind of sparked this for any player to be able to do it now with a much lesser pedigree.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up that point. Obviously, a lot of big-name free agents have forced their way out of situations they weren't happy with. Simmons obviously thinks he's on with some of those guys, even though we clearly think he's not.
Yeah.
The issue is now for the Sixers, Ben Simmons was their starting point guard for so long. Now they don't really have one. They have a few guys that could potentially go in. Tyrese Maxey has officially stated that he's going to stay with the Sixers, so he could be the starting point guard. Shake Milton could be the starting point guard, or somebody else could as well that they could trade for or sign in free agency. So, Mike, I want to go for you. Who do you think the Sixers' starting point guard will be this season?
I mean, I think it all depends on, if Ben Simmons gets traded because, we trade him and, it depends who we get back. D'Angelo Russell's a rumor from the T-Wolves we're hearing. C.J. McCollum, who, that's a trade I want because it seems like that's the best one on the table. But, if we do keep Ben Simmons, but he doesn't want to play anyway, I think, Tyrese Maxey, regardless of who we trade for, I think he's going to have a big role, and I think he can be the point guard for the future.
Yeah, I think that's someone that the Sixers were really happy that they drafted last year. Definitely showed that he has that potential to be a starting point guard in the NBA. Siobhan, I now want to go with you for the last question for Sixers talk. Who had a worse or more disappointing career in Philadelphia between Ben Simmons and Carson Wentz, two guys that were drafted in the first round the same year?
I'm going to have to say Ben Simmons because with Carson Wentz, he was on a pretty steady decline after that, really heartbreaking injury in the Super Bowl year. But, Carson Wentz kind of went quietly. Everyone kind of knew that it was going to happen sooner or later. With Ben Simmons, it's been a lot more explosive and it's been a lot more disappointing because I don't want to say that he cost the Sixers a better run in the playoffs because it obviously wasn't just him, but he didn't help. And, him and Joel are the guys that are expected to be, the leaders and the guys that set the example and play well, and he just didn't step up like he needed to. And then with him just stating, I'm not going to show up to training, I'm not going to, I don't want to be here, that's just not the way to go about it. So I think he's disappointing more than Carson because he had the whole city behind him and now he's trying to really force a way out in a very unprofessional fashion.
Yeah, and that's going to wrap up Sixers Talk, and we're going to go now into the Fast Five. First question that we have, Siobhan, who is the most underrated team in the NFL right now?
Well, as someone who knows quite a lot about football, not actually, I'm going to have to go with the Cardinals. I think Kyler Murray's been on a really great run lately. The next point is he going to win NFL MVP? It's still early in the season, but he's been putting up great numbers lately. The win against the Vikings was a very convincing one, so I think the Cardinals are really going to be one that we're going to have to, look after and talk about more this season.
Mm-hmm. And our second question goes to Mike. Off of that answer that Siobhan gave, do you think that Kyler Murray could win NFL MVP? Obviously, right now he's been really, really good. Has 9 total touchdowns, very few turnovers. Cardinals are off to a really hot start. So do you think he could win MVP?
Yeah, I think he can easily win MVP. He's, to me, just, a younger version of Russell Wilson. He's that small quarterback where he can run, he can throw. And he's got a good receiving core. DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and then, Rondale Moore, who's been, having a good first 2 weeks in his, professional NFL career. But I think he can easily win MVP.
All right, our third question. Well, not really a question, just one of our favorite segments on the show, Talking Baseball with Tyler Schmall.
Thank you. And yeah, we're going to stay with the Birds, this time the St. Louis Cardinals. And what they have done this season has been unbelievable because it came practically out of nowhere. They've won their last 12 straight. They've pretty much solidified that second wild card spot, thus making the Phillies have to go for their own division. And this is a team all year that had lofty expectations. They have one of the best corner infields in all of baseball, and they weren't able to figure it out for the most part. And then just all of a sudden, they start doing it with some of the least likely suspects. The number one, you have one of the top pitchers in baseball, Jack Flaherty. You pretty much lose him for the entire year throughout multiple injuries. So you call on your 40-year-old Adam Wainwright, who already has a lofty playoff career. And he's been incredible as of late. He's got a 2.89 ERA on the season, but a 1.43 ERA in his last 8 starts, including 2 complete game shutouts. He's been unbelievable at the start. They have the 6th highest NL leader in WAR in Tyler O'Neill, it's completely slipped my mind. A 144 OPS plus. He has just been unbelievable in his second year in the league. And just overall, the corner has done it. Goldie and Arenado, a 136 and a 123 OPS plus. They've come out of nowhere, and that matchup against what should be the Dodgers, who has a lot of history in the most recent past of the playoffs, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so fourth question that we have now, worst conference in college football. I'm going to take that one. It's not going to be one that you're thinking of. It's a Power 5 conference. The Pac-12 has been the most disappointing conference in college football in the last 3 or so years. Obviously, that a few really good teams are ranked to start out this year, and then things just fell apart. Last week, number 14 in the country, USC, lost to Stanford in a 42-28 battle. And then in week 3, last Saturday, things just completely fell apart for this conference. Number 19 Arizona lost to BYU in a close game. UCLA lost to Fresno State in a complete shocker to everyone. And then Northern Arizona beat Arizona 21-19. So this conference has completely collapsed this year. If it wasn't for Oregon beating Ohio State, this conference would not be in any contention at all for any college football playoff spot. So it's a good thing that they won. But we really need to see some of these other teams step up. Or not only will you not see a good team in the college football playoff, you won't even see a competitive Rose Bowl either. So that's something that I think is very disappointing. And now we're going to go into our last question. Which team do you think is the Eagles' biggest rival, the Cowboys or the Giants? Tyler, I'm going to start with you.
Just off the top of my head, and obviously being a Giants fan myself and going through these games, it has to be Giants-Eagles. I mean, 89, 87, and 2 overall. The Eagles just have that 2-game advantage. And you just think of plenty of occurrences. I mean, the Deshaun Jackson one always comes to my mind right away. Of just crazy finishes of 2 unorthodox organizations that always seem to be running around like a chicken with its head cut off by this point of the season.
Yeah, Mike, same question to you. Who do you think the Eagles' biggest rival is between the Giants and the Cowboys?
I mean, the Giants are definitely a rival, but I think, it's the Cowboys. I mean, twice a year, every year, when Cowboys week comes around, the intensity gets turned up to high. So, I'm looking forward to it, and, I think it's the Cowboys.
Siobhan, with your football expertise, who do you think the biggest rival is between the Giants and the Cowboys?
Well, I love a good Philly-New York rivalry, but I would have to agree with Mike in saying it's the Cowboys. It's a historic rivalry. I love a good sports rivalry where the teams have just despised each other for years. It's great motivation for the Eagles to really step up their play and step up the quality, so I'm going to have to go with the classic Eagles-Cowboys rivalry.
My answer is going to be the Giants just because they've broken my heart so many times. And they've won 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime, and the Cowboys have won 0. So definitely Giants' biggest rival for me. That's going to wrap it up now for Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thanks for watching this episode. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, Sports Talk LTV. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good rest of your week, and make sure to tune in next week for Sports Talk Philadelphia.